Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is DB333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4, The New Order, Last Days of Europe. Now, the last time we hopped in for a good old pre-recorded series, none of this fancy schmancy live streaming stuff that I've done relatively recently. We did a couple Komi games. We did one as Svetlana Bukarina, set up a nice, friendly Soviet Union, had a good old workers' communism, very friendly, very peaceful, very strong contender to reunite Russia. We killed a couple political dissenters, but, what are you going to do? That's the price for utopia, after all. And then before that, we did a good old game as Alexei Kosygin, and did a Komi normal democratic game, where we showed off some of the paths that weren't fucking Tsar Alexei and Sergei Tabaritsky. I also have a Komi Sarov game that's uploading right now, probably relatively alongside this. And if you haven't checked out before, I did a Albert Speer Gang of Four Reformist LP. A few months ago, relatively recently. And if you haven't seen that yet, please do. It's probably my favorite series I've ever done as a YouTuber. Definitely the best series I've played as of late. And a lot of people enjoyed it, so they said it was probably one of my best series, so I appreciate it. And I'd appreciate a bit more love on it, I guess. But at the same time, we're starting a new series. I could use some love over here too, so we'll go and do that. I was gonna play this nation a little earlier than I did. I decided to wait till cutting room floor, just avoid the compatibility issues and all that. The U.S. of A. While America joined the Second World War, it was too late. The U.S. performed admirably, humbling the Kriegsmarine in the Atlantic and beginning to turn the tide in the Pacific, but the invention of the atom bomb ended any hope of American victory for those few remaining allies. Now, 20 years later, America stands divided. While the Depression is slowly ending, the American political scene sits in chaos. The government remains locked between the uneasy Republican Democrats and the National Progressive Party, a failing union of America's political outcasts. With the civil rights movement greatly shifting the political sphere, the 60s will herald the greatest threat America has ever faced. So we'll go ahead and select the country. Here we are. We're missing, they renamed the Patton Islands over here. I forget if that's what exactly we call them. They take over the ports of San Francisco and LA. It's a little awkward. And they also, they took Hawaii, which isn't nice. So America, it could be doing a lot worse, but she's not in the best position right now. And, I'm biased, I was born in America. It's my home country. I love her. So, I'm hoping we can maybe set her up to do some good, hopefully. And put her in a position to be a beacon of democracy and freedom and science, too. Which might give you a bit of a hint on who we're going to be playing as. Before we do that, though, I want to go and check out the custom game rules real quick. There's a mod. I forget the exact name. In fact, I'm using two mods. One is the graphical mod you're looking at right now. It's the Vicky 2 Atlas graphics mod. I forget the exact name. If I forget to link any of these mods in the description, by the way, please go in the comment section below and harass me over it, because I want to give them credit. So for country paths, I'm going to set this to the NDL just in the hope that they will go with the resistance instead of the fucking collaborationist. And that's not because it'll be easier for us. It's partially because of that. It's just because I'm tired of seeing Margaret Thatcher in every single game I've been doing. Because it seems every time I play, there you go, fucking Iron Lady. So I'm getting a little annoyed with that. So I'm hoping that with that, it'll just make things fucking easier. And if not, what are you going to do? And we're going to keep scrolling down. And we're going to do detente with the ANC for South Africa, just to make that a little easier on us. Because we want to set things up so you want to set ourselves up so we're in a nice position. Because things are going to be kind of tough. I want to make things kind of as easy, relatively, as we can do. So, yeah. There's not many paths you can do with a custom mod, unfortunately. I hope the devs will, on this mod, will add something else. Because I really wanted to have Italy do the democratic path for the Verona conference so we could have a great game between us and Japan over them. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but hey, what are you going to do? We'll just go ahead and start up the game and see where the cards end up landing. Years ago, before the talk of a Nazi jackboot and the Japanese tyranny of the Isles, the stars and stripes flew high and mighty above the likeness of a different worldwide sickness, that of the excesses of the Roaring Twenties, the explosion of the Wall Street crash, and the dread of the Great Depression that journeyed forth, wreaking havoc upon a crippled America. It was here that the ideas of a Rooseveltian New Deal burned, as comparisons to the failures of the Soviets' Nikolai Bukharin's own doings left the ideas unpopular and unsupported. And it was here that Al Smith came on top for the Democrats, allowing for then incumbent President Herbert Hoover to maintain his stay in the White House. With 1936, however, things changed for U.S. Joseph P. Kennedy promised an administration of balance and isolation, seeking to tiptoe away from the breaking out of war in Europe by the Nazis, despite the constant pleas from Allied states. Peace and abstention reigned in North America, allowing the country to maneuver a recovery from the Great Depression and bolster the American economy. However, calm and stability hath reigned not, for on December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan, crippling the U.S.'s fleet as it rested in Pearl Harbor. With the Navy on the retreat and a new president to take hold, President Harry S. Truman promised the American people that they would see the beacon of liberty push through for the cause of democracy. A promise which sunk to the depths of the Pacific on July 4th, 1945, as a flash of light consumed the island of Hawaii upon the dropping of an atomic bomb on the previously attacked Pearl Harbor. To make matters worse, late August saw the signing of the HoI Accords, officially ending the war with the first great American defeat in history, as it signed away the state of Hawaii and the naval bases of LA and San Francisco to Japanese control, alongside endless amounts of reparations to pay and the lifting of the embargoes to Axis-aligned states. The chaotic 1940 election saw Thomas Dewey signed Trump v. embarrassed Democrats over a reeling nation, having to deal with the planning of seeds towards the new political paths of the United States. The first post-war election, an angry and bitter American populace almost unanimously turned their backs upon the ruling Democratic Party. Facing waves of defection to the Republicans and the loss of nearly all of their Senate seats, the party desperately sought a way to survive. Ultimately, a radical solution was proposed by several former Democrats turned Republicans, such as Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, a union with the now triumphant Republican Party. After much wrangling, the two political parties were reunited to form the Republican Democratic Party, briefly turning America into a one-party state. Thus, the legendary general, Dwight D. Eisenhower, famed for his bold defense along the English line against the Nazis, was elected the first president under the Republican Democrats. Eisenhower worked hard and created the OFN, an economic and defensive alliance of the democratic forces left within the world. However, with the final declaration of Eisenhower's intent to oversee Hawaii's reintroduction to the Union against the HoI Accords, the U.S. has firmly entrenched its position in the dangerous world today, whilst new rising political stars come to sit in the most powerful seats of the country. Now, as we look forward into the 1960s, President Richard Milhouse Nixon and Vice President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, son of former President Joseph P. Kennedy, find themselves at the helm of the White House. However, the RDs no longer remain unchallenged in the political arena. As the American Depression wore on and the battle of civil rights began to enter the public consciousness, some of America began to turn to alternative voices to represent their grievances. The National Progressive Front, formed by Henry A. Wallace and Glenn Taylor in 1947, became a beacon of progressivism, while George S. Patton's Progressive Party was established in 1951 to represent hardline conservative interests. Both were able to carry states in the re-election of 52 and 56, but neither could unseat the RDs. In the interest of presenting a united anti-establishment voice, the two parties made the controversial decision to unite under one banner, the National Progressive Party, though whether this Frankenstein of political movement can have an impact remains to be seen. So where we're at now. It's figure 1962. Richard Nixon is president of the U.S. Fortunately, his work is cut out for him. America, from coast to coast, desires social reforms at all levels. A new crisis is brewing in enemy-controlled Hawaii as the aggressive Japanese place nuclear missiles on the island chain. Racism is running rampant across the South as African Americans plead for the Civil Rights Act to be signed, while many white Southerners fiercely oppose the act. The Cold War between us, Germany, and the Empire of Japan is beginning to heat up once again, and it's President Nixon's job to bring his country to the rightful place on this world stage. So we have a couple information about, the Republican Democrats, Bennett, Johnson, Strom Thurmond, Chase Smith, Wallace, Harrington, Jackson. All nice guys. Maybe not Strom, or arguably, well, mostly Wallace. Arguably he can be nice, but that's beyond the point. We're not gonna be worrying about the rest of these guys for now. Instead, we're gonna be looking at some of the features. We're gonna be charting America's course by influencing its quadrennial elections, enacting bills, and vying for control of the August Senate. Then we're gonna defend the old guard and old politics with the Republican Democrats, or offer the American people alternatives with the National Progressives. And then we're going to try to contain fascism abroad through subterfuge and proxy wars. Onwards to freedom. Now we're going to set up our army real quick. Figure this game out before we do anything else. So I'm going to want to take all my airborne guys and set them up in a different army. And then, shit. Okay, this has been more of a pain than it should be. There we go. I'm going to take the Marines and set them up in their own separate thing as well. You can get some more airborne, all the airborne guys in their own unit. We'll merge these guys up. Field Marshal, we'll go with Westmoreland. For a General, we'll go with Max Taylor. For these guys, I don't know what's really the best for them. I'm thinking maybe air assault. I think we'll go with Wolno, maybe. Actually, we'll go with Bastion Jr., an organizer. And then for Marines, we'll go with one of these invader guys. I think we'll go with Leonard Chapman Jr. for them. So we have some other guys we need to go ahead and assign. We'll put one guy in with Taylor, and then we'll get another army going. And I think we're going to go and give them Chris Wallace. Charles H. Bonesteel III. Though you can't tell me that that's not Chris Wallace, because that looks like fucking Chris Wallace. There we go. And then we got some guys over here that we need to sign there. We got some Marines, which I believe belong in here. Nope. They belong there. In fact, all these guys belong with Chris Wallace and not Besson. How embarrassing. I'm already making myself look silly. I'll move these guys over here to keep them kind of color coordinated, or vaguely coordinated. Got the naval invaders done. So here's what we're going to do. With these guys, for no particular reason, we're going to set up an invasion of Guyana and Paramaribo. Or Paramaribo? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. In true American fashion, we're intervening in places that most people can't fucking pronounce. So there we go. Research-wise, we'll go ahead and do some better weapons, more better weapons, even better weapons, and we'll do some industry stuff. We have some free civilian factories, which I'll go and start building more civilian factories with. Just kind of click randomly. I'm not too worried really wherever they're going. That looks good to me. Just kind of get it evenly spread throughout the Midwest. We'll do some stuff in the South too. A little bit of stuff in New England. I guess something in Florida too, why not? And then we have a CIA, which we'll go ahead and try to increase our budget a little bit. And we'll get working on This is very similar to the R&D in Germany. They added this, I think, with a new patch. So we'll go and do that. Work on this. We'll do the belly buster. Actually, we'll do engraved mirrors. Get some escape chance and some mission success chance increases. So there we go. We can also, let's unlock some operations in Africa. And there's nothing going on in South America, so I'm not. Actually, I'll invest here just to be safe. Because you never know what they might be doing. Actually, I really don't know what they might be doing because this is all new to me. We'll get some more helicopters going. Convoys are always a safe bet. We'll go ahead and get some new aircraft carriers. We'll get the USS Enterprise building up. And then subs are always a safe bet, so I'll get some subs building as well. Sturgeon classes. There we are. So we've set up a lot of our game right now for the opening moves. So let's take a look at where we're at now after this. First off, we're going to take a look at our unique mechanics. We have the Senate, which, I mean, everyone in the U.S. knows what the Senate is. If you don't, it's our, I think it's our upper house. Yeah, I think it's our upper house, technically. Every state in the union, no matter how many people they have, they get 2 people to represent them. And so, in the game, we're going to have to sway all 4, technically 6 factions of the parties and get them to support our legislation. Which might be it's going to be a bit of a challenge, admittedly, but we'll work our damnedest to try to figure it out. This is a very fun mechanic. I enjoy the campaigning, which we'll see this year, sometime in the next few parts. Probably, if not this part, then the part after that, and not that, definitely the one after. So yeah, we'll see some more action, how this changes up, even like before some of the stuff changes. Before the election stuff starts, I want to say. But before that, we have Richard Nixon. Jesus. Richard Milhouse Nixon is a complicated figure. Originally representative and then senator from California, he rapidly rose through the ranks of Congress through skilled political maneuvering. During his time as a senator, Nixon worked closely with Joe McCarthy in carrying out the Gray Scare, working to root out suspected fascists in the government. While he didn't share the spotlight to the same extent and as McCarthy did, nobody doubts that Nixon is still an anti-fascist crusader through and through. As a lifelong member of the Republican Party, Nixon has never been totally comfortable working alongside the Democrats. The broad popularity of the NPP dictates that they must, however, and the coalition ticket that won him the 60th election has made his presidency a living hell. John F. Kennedy's position as a vice president has driven a wedge in the executive branch, as his own magnetic charisma and stunning competence have taken the spotlight away from Nixon more than once. As much as Nixon wants to focus on foreign policy so he can act to undermine the unstable German and Japanese empires, domestic affairs have gotten in the way. Civil rights issues can no longer be ignored as racial tensions flare and people demand action one way or another. While Nixon has been reluctant to endorse either segregation or integration, staying on the fence is becoming increasingly costly. Of course, Nixon is also doing what he can to keep the NPP down, including some extra legal means. With challengers coming at him from all sides, including within the White House, Nixon will have a hell of a time trying to keep the ship of state steady. So that's Nixon. We also have John Kennedy as our head of government, our VP. We have William P. Rogers as our foreign minister. Robert McNamara as our economy minister. And then Melvin Laird as our security minister. So, we have our industrial expertise and our army expertise is going up already, which is nice to see. We have a massive stockpile of nukes. Our poverty rate is not preferable. We want to up that eventually, but it could be worse than it is already. So I'll take it. And we have some national spirits we'll take a look at. The first one is the last bastion of liberty. The United States of America is the last light of freedom shining in a world of darkness. The other great democratic nations of this fragile world are now turned into dust, smashed by the overbearing, fascist-holding fist of the Reich and the rising sun. As the only major allied power to survive the inexorable advance of evil during the Second World War, America must bear the torch of liberty into this new, twisted age. After that, we have the American malaise. America was once a nation of indomitable will, a nation so bountiful and spirited that its optimism seemed unconquerable. That was ended by the atomic bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now across each and every one of these United States, the country is mired in a malaise with only a dim light at the end of a tunnel. The land of opportunity and idealism has been overcome by poverty and strife. It is a pit that may not be surmounted easily, and only time will tell if the patriotic fire that once burned American hearts shall return, or if it will be extinguished. After that, we have Jim Crow. Since Vienna Reconstruction, a brutal racist apartheid has been instituted across the southern United States. Taking their name from the racist minstrel song, Jump Jim Crow, the Jim Crow laws forced black Americans to live their lives separately from and completely unequal to the white population. Blacks are forced to the back of buses, through separate entrances in buildings, into separate neighborhoods and schools, and are buried in separate cemeteries. These laws even prohibit blacks from marrying whites or using the same drinking fountains. While fiercely defended in the South, they are seen by all decent men as a backwards atrocity in the so-called land of the free. As black Americans grow more forceful in their demands for equality, America's government will soon have to choose whether to crucify Jim Crow or sacrifice their future at his altar. And then finally we have the strength of the OFN, which is our little faction. If we can open up the map mode, we have US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Guyana, as well as I believe the Belize and the West Indies Federation in our faction. It's a small group, but they're our friends, and we have to stand by them the best we can. So moving on from here. Let's open up our focus tree. And some of the stuff has already been decided, because I remember, roleplay-wise, we're halfway through our term. We've already decided some of this stuff already. Namely, Nixon is taking the middle line with civil rights. We're not quite... He hasn't quite laid down a cement policy on them. And this opens us up to either the Kennedy Plan and passing a Civil Rights Act, or cracking down on the movement and vetoing the Civil Rights Act, which will make certain factions of either Democrats or Republicans not happy, but we'll get there. We also have we've already made the choice between containment theory and splendid isolation, so we're going to be working on cracking the steel curtain and smashing the crested wave. So I'll work on doing some underhanded tactics against the Germans in Europe. Why did I blank on that? England and all those guys, as well as helping out South Africa. And here we'll be able to help out Indonesia and the Philippines, even though they don't have a revolt, I think, program. And we can also invest in India to have a counterbalance in the region. And then I think most importantly, just for the story region, the campaign trail. They can't lick our dick. He. So we've already chosen to run a clean and an orderly campaign, as opposed to letting America know how much of a pocket liberal we are and bend over backwards for the whims of a fascist-funded mob of Jews and communists who will spit on your grave no matter how much limp-wristed pussy shit you do to keep the fuckers pleased. So, that makes me laugh to no end. It really does. And so, we've done our hands dirty in true Nixon fashion, but I'm sure that won't backfire on us in any way. So for now, we're going to work on cracking the steel curtain. The war's aftermath, Germania drew a line hugging the stretches of Europe's coast between Norway's fjords and the Strait of Gibraltar. Along its length rose a string of watchtowers, sea walls, and concertina wire, their seams held together by trillions of Reichsmarks and the Führer's Aryan will. This stranglehold over the old world goes by the deceptive names by deceptive names like the Einats Pact and Fortress Europa. The free world calls it for what it is, a steel curtain. The Folkshall would have one believe that the steel curtain is as the Gibraltar Dam, impregnable, insurmountable, everlasting. In truth, the curtain is pregnant with rot, surmounted by power struggles, and frail on its deathbed, much like its architect Hitler. Subtle blows can make gaps out of its rustiest sections. There, Liberty's torchlight can filter back into the continent afresh. So there we go. And it's time, I think, to finally, after however long, get started. We may as well get working on some divisions. We'll get working on some infantry guys. We finished rubber processing, strangely enough, and we'll get working on a couple airborne divisions, because these are great, especially for our purposes related to intervening in the civil war and a bunch of armed conflicts around the world. The airborne divisions are insanely great for that. But we have the end of the missile crisis already. For the past several weeks, the United States has been embroiled in a crisis with Japan. Our former jewel in the Pacific, Hawaii, has turned into a staging point for Japanese medium-range ballistic missiles, which were discovered by the CIA U-2C spy plane not long ago. After a tense standoff between the USN First Fleet and the IJN, Vice President Kennedy approached the Empire with an offer. The United States would remove its own medium-range ballistic missiles from Australia in return for the Japanese doing the same in Hawaii. After several rounds of tense negotiations, this offer was accepted, despite the urging of the Joint Chiefs, who argued that this was the perfect time to reclaim America's lost territory. The dubs have prevailed, and today both sides are removing our missiles. This has been a major diplomatic coup for Kennedy, who is being hailed across the nation as a hero for his actions of crisis. President Nixon, on the other hand, mostly stayed out of negotiations and has been widely criticized for such. We've staved off midnight for now. So we have that going. I'm going to take a look and see what England's doing. Tick-tock, tick-tock. What is this, Sergei Tabaritsky? What the fuck? There we go. That's what I like to see. No more Margaret Thatcher! Hopefully. Knock on wood. And, this is not good. Germany today proudly announced to the world that a German was the first to ever step on the moon. Eberhard Kollner, using a rocket based on the A9, A10 design from World War II, an successful team of pilots, led by the acclaimed scientist Werner von Braun, successfully landed, along with a team predominantly made up of former Luftwaffe pilots. Kollner, on live television broadcasts globally, snapped a smart salute to the flag of the Reich, with the Earth visible in the backdrop, a photo which is spread across the globe, thanks in no small part to German propaganda. Jubilant celebrations began almost immediately across Germany. Already, President Nixon has publicly vowed that the British shall continue, and that NASA is already making preparations for a permanent human presence upon the moon, in the form of a lunar colony. The president's announcement was quickly followed by one from Japan, who stated that they will land on Mars. Despite the president's insistence that the race is not over, the American public has taken the news poorly. Although America managed to get the first astronaut into space, public confidence in the space program is at an all-time low, as fewer Americans than ever look to the night sky with a sense of explorative awe. Which is a damn shame. We begrudgingly congratulate Mr. Kollner. Well, hopefully we can do something and help NASA out. Right? Let's check out Russia. We don't have enough money to check out Russia, actually. With a compass in hand and butterflies in stomach, he gazed off towards the visage of Anchorage, rapidly shrinking away in the horizon. A game of cards and a hearty serving of alcohol had certainly done wonders to feed his excitement and wanderlust while they were docked in port, but he had to admit it was hard to get the yesterday's goodbyes out of his mind. His mother's reaction had not surprised him, a quiet bout of sobbing and a laundry list of demands as they stood before the front door. She'd been nervous for weeks, and all that time he had done his best to reassure her. This was something he needed to do. He would take all available precautions. He would have all the necessary documents. It was a conversation that seemed to never end. No, he had resolved any lingering strife with his mom. It wasn't her that was sprawling such remorse in a sea-bound heart. Surprisingly, it was Dad. To say his father was an enigma would be an understatement. Childhood memories existed beyond count. Missed baseball games, absent birthday parties, one-word responses to kindergarten art pieces. It wasn't that Dad didn't care at all, per se. From time to time, he would show his affection, teach his sons to replace a flat tire or two. The problem was consistency, or the lack thereof. At any moment, Dad might disappear into the basement again, or a car would pull out of a driveway and return home after family dinner had ended. He never knew what to make of it. Perhaps the war had simply taken too large a toll, creating a man who could only function on whiskey and lonesome hours. So when Dad burst into tears in front of a taxi, launched into a bear hug, and handed his son a compass and pistol subtly before the car door closed, he couldn't help but feel shaken. Was he really making the right decision if it could affect a man such as that so greatly? Ultimately, he brushed the thought away and returned below deck. There was no turning back now, and he had a great and exciting adventure laid out before him. He would return alive, and ultimately change for the better. It was time to find out what's out there. So we don't have much going on in the Middle East. We'll refrain from doing over there. And Europe is locked, so we might want to take a look at that eventually. But until then, news from Germany today is sporadic at best. CIA assets in Germany have reported that shortly after celebration of the moon landing being settled, German military units and several platoons worth of the German dictator's various bodyguards, our units, filled the streets and immediately put the city under martial law. From what we are hearing, an assassin, which Germans claimed had belonged to the Japanese Haitai, attempted to kill the Führer, but was stopped in his attempt by one of Hitler's personal bodyguards and killed on the spot. Already, reports of several assassinations have surfaced as various politicians in the Reichstag initially believed Hitler had been killed and began long-planned plots to eliminate their rivals into the chaos. In the streets, the various military units came to blows, as various units ordered one another to stand down and the chain of command broke down. While the situation has begun to recover, martial law is still in effect in Germania, and suddenly the Reich seems much weaker. In Washington, this raises the question, how can the Germans maintain their New World Order when they can hardly handle themselves? As one eagle falls, another rises. Well, there we go. Things are not good in Germany, needless to say. How are our Marines doing? Ooh. Now this is an event I've been looking forward to. He soared in his rocket ship above the earth. As he gazed through the capsule window, as his continent stretched out beneath him, he realized just how small mankind truly was. It occurred to him that if every human being had the opportunity to see what he could see, how insignificant all the struggles and wars and vendettas were, the world might finally know peace. Peace where everyone could work towards the advancement of science, prosperity, and... A sudden ringing cut across his psyche, and he was jolted from a dream of days past. Sitting sluggishly awake from his sadly earthbound bed, he fumbled for the telephone on his bedside cabinet and pulled the receiver to his ear. John Glenn speaking. Way too early in the morning, I might add. A panicked voice came across the line. John, it's James. Have you heard of the news? Glenn rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and replied, James Edwin Glenn, I have not even gotten out of bed yet. Be more specific. They're defunding NASA! A hastily made coffee and frantic flip through the morning paper later, and John Glenn felt a wrench in his gut as he faced the prospect of his life's work being all for naught. So what? The Germans got to the moon before us. And that means space is over? What can we do? They can't just give up on the future. Nixon's already made his mind up. He wants to move the money over to the military and other practical projects. Webb paused as Glenn made an outraged intake of breath. I really don't think there's anything that can stop him at this point. I'm sorry, John. Glenn felt himself back in the Riviera of spaceflight. The government could not let the dream of space be but a dream. America had to live to see the stars. Nothing we can do? We'll see about that. Because some men can still dream. And so that's a little bit of foreshadowing. We're doing a John Glenn run, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to space. We're going to the one place that has not been tainted by fucking fascism, ladies and gentlemen. Mars. Now, before that, we have to wait until the 68 elections for that. A little bit of a spoiler alert, so we're going to have someone in the interim, which I already have decided, which we'll get to when we get to. I'll explain all of this as it kind of comes along. Okay, so this comes into the election mechanics. The United States is once again gearing up for the election season. As per the Constitution, all of the Senate seats in the House of Representatives and a third of the Senate seats will be up for grabs in November, along with innumerable state and local races across the nation, and the course of American politics will change with it. Status quo or radical upheaval, it is time for the people to decide. The Republican Democrats and the National Progressive Party, along with numerous third parties, are gearing up their political machines across the 50 states, with special focus going to those Senate seats up for grabs. Tens of thousands of volunteers, campaign staff, and candidates are gearing up to begin the primaries, rallies, whistle-stop tours, public speeches, glad handling, and debates that will issue the nation's attention for the next few months. Issues of great importance will be debated, candidates will be scrutinized, and eventually millions of voters around the nation will get the chance to make their voices heard. And the greatest democracy in the world will once again prove herself. Now, the thing about the getting Glenn in is that we won't be able to campaign. We can't have an already incumbent to have the primary, so we're going to have to go with the NPP. So fighting for you and me, let's help elect the NPP. So this opens up the campaigning, which is a very, very fun mechanic. We're coming off an election here. We figured out the results of what's happened here, though some people are still holding out hope that something else might change. Though, we'll see what happens. I don't even fucking know what'll happen anymore. We'll wait and see. So, this is, I mean, I already know what's probably going to happen, but, that's besides the point. So, we get a campaign in certain areas, and we can see, more or less, where the polls and the people are leaning across the nation. So we have safe, likely, leaning, and tilt for a couple of these places. So we have to campaign against the AI in these certain areas and try to get these places to flip. So I'm trying to decide where we want to campaign right off the bat. I'm thinking we're going to want to make a play right now towards the Great Lakes. Yeah, we'll do the Great Lakes. Knock on the doors throughout the Great Lakes states, whether they be the industrial heartlands of Detroit, Chicago, or the dairy farms of Wisconsin. Wisconsin. I know that's not how you say it, but that's how I like to say it. Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's kind of boring. Wisconsin, that's fun. So we're cracking the steel curtain. From the sun-drenched hills, revanche-laden neighborhoods, and wild underground economics of the Bay Area comes the debut novel of one Ken Kesey, One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest. Bizarre, profane, provocative, and a gauntlet thrown onto the table of American literature. Inspired by Kesey's work as a psychiatric orderly in Menlo Park, California, the novel follows one Randall McMurphy. McMurphy, a veteran of Scotland, a proud street brawler, is sentenced to time in a psychiatric hospital for battery and illicit gambling. There he meets a number of characters, including the novel's narrator, Chief Bromden, and the tyrannical head nurse, Nurse Ratchet. Over the course of the novel, McMurphy challenges Ratchet's rules, standing up for himself and the other patrons of Ward. He's rewarded for this with a lobotomy, courtesy of Ratchet. The novel ends with Bromden smothering McMurphy in an act of mercy before escaping to freedom. Cuckoo's Nest has already garnered its fair share of accolades and controversies alike. Many are calling it a portrayal of America's own authoritarian systems in an age when the nation is supposedly a bastion of liberty in the world. Hollywood star Kirk Douglas is rumored to be seeking the adoption rights, while schools across America are rumored to be banned again. I'm so crazy, I plan to vote for Eisenhower again this November. And then we have protests in Birmingham. The civil rights movement
movement is reaching its crescendo. All across America, there are protests, rallies, and riots hosted by the civil rights activists, and they get worse by the month. Just this week, a massive march was held in Birmingham, Alabama, the heart of the segregationist South, with tens of thousands of activists, white and black alike, calling for equal rights. Although it started, civil local police chief Eugene Bull Connor quickly deployed riot police and sent dogs loose on the protesters. The peaceful march quickly turned into a running battle in the streets between police and activists. This event has been widely televised across the nation, with average Americans shocked by the police brutality on display in Birmingham. Many of the more liberal news sources across the U.S. have likened the event in Alabama to those in Germany decades ago, citing police brutality and the suppression of activists to draw parallels with the Nazi regime. Worrying, to say the least. Uh-oh. It looks like Germany wants to try out the new Hydra content. Shit. I mean, it's canon, so it makes sense. At least they announced it. I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations of a moment, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day, on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table at a brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a desert state, sweltering with the heat of injustice and oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. On the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, prominent civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech to a grand crowd of over 250,000 people. His words have already spread across the country like wildfire, as men and women, black and white alike, spread a new slogan: I have a dream. The time for action is now. So this bypasses the focus, they have a dream. So there we go, we have that figured out. We're going to have another split down the party eventually between what to support and what not to. So, we'll get to that when we get to that, of course. But until then, let's check on the campaigning. The opposition is campaigning also in the Great Lakes. Uh-oh. 1 week ago, civil rights activists held a protest in Birmingham, Alabama that quickly devolved into a riot. Now tens of thousands of people opposed to the civil rights movement have staged a countermarch, waving the flags of the Confederacy, their home state, and even a few swastikas. In comparison to the previous week, the police chief didn't even bother deploying more than a few lightly equipped beat cops, several of which joined the protest. Furthermore, there are reports that pro-civil rights activists attempting to flock to Birmingham to continue the movement have been driven out of the city by police and locals alike, with several would-be protesters returning home battered and bruised. With the rising violence in Birmingham and elsewhere, where Vice President Kennedy has reportedly convinced President Nixon to consider federalizing the Alabama National Guard and deploying it to restore order in the state. Well, that's even more worrying. So we're cracking the steel curtain. We're going to go ahead and work on the South Africa plan. South Africa is one of the last true democratic strongholds left in Africa who are not fully opposed to working with us. Yet the presence of a Nazi scum north of them makes their existence and our chance to make use of such an African foothold possibly very short. To combat this, a plan has been drawn up to slowly draw the U.S. and South Africa together in order to protect their democracy and weaken the grip of German fascism in Africa as a whole. Well, there we go. We can get a new operative. We'll go with William Clemmings. That apparent fine hunk of man. President Nixon stared at the world map projected onto a screen in the White House briefing room. The center was America, encircled, facing the Japanese and their colonial minions to the west, and the Germans and their slave empire to the east. But where the Japanese and Americans had only recently escaped Armageddon's embrace in Hawaii, the Nazi Empire was fraying at the seams. Hitler grew older and more infirm by the day. No amount of clever camera work and pre-recorded speeches could hide his creaking gait. His once mesmerizing oratory shrunken into senile ramblings. Germany's moon landing was not a triumph, it was an epitaph. Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird looked up from the CIA intelligence briefings of the German Reich. It's a house of cards, Mr. President. Britain chafes under a foreign occupier. Brittany already deals with us in secret, and Norwegians continue to resist decades of occupation, and their African colonies will wither on the vine without support. All that together by a man who can't finish the sentence without forgetting how it started, Nixon noted. When Nixon goes, his successors will fall over themselves to split spoils, like Alexander's generals did in antiquity. Laird handed over a sheaf of documents from CIA folder. It's not the opportunity of a lifetime. We'll never get another shot at crippling the Nazis like this. It's time to go back to the old world. Now, real quick, we'll cut the budget the best we can as we construct some factories. I want to get working on some reserves so we can start paying off our debt and put ourselves in a solid economic position. A solid position that we can have, really. And so let's get moving on. John Glenn stood before an assembled mass of scientists, engineers, science enthusiasts, and journalists. He'd already spoken with a few people and shared in their frustration in NASA's situation, talked about his experience as an astronaut, and even signed a couple of autographs. Now he just needed to make a big splash. I had just been having a pleasant dream about my last mission when my good friend, James Webb, woke me with the news. I was distraught, to say the least, to know that the government was giving up on the future of space travel. Partly because the thought of never going up there myself is saddening to consider, but that's not the only reason. By ending all involvement in space, President Nixon has given up. He's accepted stagnation and decline, abandoning the stars to fascist powers. He says we lost the space race, but as long as the stars still shine, space will never be lost. I implore that the President reconsider his options. The future of America and the human species as a whole lies above us. About 20 minutes later, Glenn made his closing remarks and was greeted with raucous applause. He felt satisfied that his words had hit their mark. With so many journalists in attendance, tomorrow's papers would carry them further still. Yet he still felt defeated. His words alone would not be enough to save NASA. If American space travel was to have a future, it would need to have a voice to represent it in the halls of power. John Glenn had never been one for politics, but as he thought of it, he realized that political office may be his best course of seeing his dream fulfilled. As he drove home, he recalled that Ohio's governorship was up for election in a few months. It was almost a crazy thought, and yet, an astronaut in office? I can see it happening, personally. Okay, so our opposition's campaign is... We'll see how they do. Let's see how we do. A solid campaign. And compare that to how they're doing. Respectable. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so we campaign... A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free. I do not expect the union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Abraham Lincoln. Though the institution of slavery was torn down at the end of the Civil War by the 13th Amendment, a failed Reconstruction and decades of Jim Crow ensured that the issue of race would not or could not be solved. As the divides within the Republican Democratic Party grew, debates turning into fights, and friends turning into enemies. The truth only becomes clearer and clearer. The party as it stands cannot be saved. Yet there is still time to act. America must once again reckon with its issues of race, be it through words or war. We can only pray for less blood be shed this time around, for the fate of a world rests upon this near divided house. God, can't you two just play nice? Trying to decide where we want to campaign after this. Might want to go up to New England after this, because that can be a pretty solid NPP campaign. According to his landlord, Joseph Greenberg was a rather unassuming fellow. He paid his rent on time, never had any noise complaints, and always helped old Miss Connors help her carry groceries up the stairs. In reality, this was all a cover, something that the landlord learned when he opened Greenberg's empty apartment to the sight of piles of surveillance equipment and folders with swastikas stamped upon them. Thinking quickly, she called up police, who in turn informed the FBI and arrested Greenberg this morning after he left for work. Joseph Greenberg was revealed to actually be Josef Hansen, an agent for the German Abwehr. Ironically disguised as a Jewish American, his mission was to secure a job at Bell Telephone, study their communications infrastructure, and identify flaws for the installation of wiretaps and other espionage methods. Even more concerning was his phone book had the numbers of several local NPP politicians inside. It seems he was trying to contact the party's fringe elements, including the fascist agitator, Francis Bakayaki. Charges for violating the Espionage Act are already being brought upon him, but he will likely end up being simply deported back to Germany rather than facing a long prison term in the United States. Well, that's one less Nazi to worry about. I'm thinking we might want to go for the West Coast. The Dirksen Building's cafeteria was a common haunt for senators on a lunch break. Today they would play a host to most prestigious pair. Vice President John Fitzgerald Kennedy sat thoughtfully chewing on a turkey sandwich. Opposite him sat a smiling man, who the party registry knew as his chief of staff, but who John had always known as his brother. "It's been too long since we've taken time to ourselves," said John with a smile. "How are you, Bobby? Ethel's still taking good care of you, I hope." Robert Francis Kennedy laughed at the playful wink his brother gave him. "I can hardly complain of the home life, Jack. Still, current events haven't exactly been great for my sleep." The older Kennedy nodded sympathetically. The violence is getting worse for sure. Nixon's been a stick in the mud about it. It isn't helping either. He still won't endorse any legislation on the matter. "Can't you do something about it?" "As long as the president sits on the fence, things will only get worse." "I'd love to, but you know how Nixon is," muttered John, idly stirring his coffee. Knowing him, he'd probably just veto whatever we put in front of him and yell at us for fracturing party unity. "But this is far more important, the party unity, Jack. There are millions of Americans, millions of good, honest people, being cast aside for things that are far beyond their control. The longer we wait, the greater the suffering will be." Fixing his brother with an intense but encouraging look, he continued, "You're the vice president. At the very least, you can use your voice in the name of those who have no voice." John was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "You've always been a good man, Bobby." "You're right, of course. I must act. Family matters." So we'll start our campaign in the West Coast. And then we're going to have to cut it here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you as always for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you want to see more of this content in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more uploads every weekday, as well as every Saturday. If you have any comments, feedback, concerns, anything of the sort, go ahead and leave in the comment section below. I read all the comments I get and appreciate any all feedback you might have for me. If you want to send a few bucks more way, I have a Patreon down link below. We can, if you want to Patreon, down link below if you want to send bucks my way. If you want to chat or play games, I have a Discord. If you want to have a good old time and watch me do sort of stuff live, I have a Twitch. All those links are down in the description box below. So yeah, that's it for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you as always for watching. My name has been Dogbug333, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.